Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 2 Episode 6. It is called The Price. The spoilers for the episode. It is the penultimate episode of the season, which does feel very weird. It does feel like we're wrapping up far too soon. While it's true the second game is much longer than the first game, it was one big complete story, so I think there was no way that splitting it into two seasons was not going to feel a little, just like, that feeling you get when you're watching a two-parter and you're going to get to the end of part one and you're just not going to actually get to finish the story yet. And it feels a little deflating in some ways. Like, I think I would have felt that no matter what, but the fact that a couple of things have felt a little rushed and that we're almost at the finale now, I'm feeling it that kind of creep up on me where I'm like, oh no, there's only one more left? That sucks. But hey, it is what it is. This episode, as expected, was the flashback episode. And it mostly did what was expected. It did a couple of key flashbacks that were in the game, which I was excited to see, and it was really great seeing them they play out, particularly the museum with the T-Rex and the space shuttle kind of sequence, or the capsule, I should say. And that stuff was fantastic in the game. It was fantastic here. They captured it very well. The whole moment where Ellie is, celebrating her birthday and she's closing her eyes and she's listening to the real audio from, I think it was Apollo 11 she was listening to. And, you actually get the effects of, like, it looks like she's going into space. The rumble, the fire outside the window, all that stuff. Just to make it feel like she's really experiencing it. That was very effective in the game, and I think it translated beautifully here. I think what surprised me about this episode is that it did a flashback that I didn't think it would do yet, because in the game, it didn't come until much, much, much later, like near the end of the story, in fact. And that is the final flashback sequence with them on the porch. Well, some of it anyway. Half of that conversation is actually a different scene in the game and takes place a bit earlier in the timeline. So they kind of fuse two things together in the show, which is fine. It works. It's I had no issues with that. I mean, all the key beats they needed to hit, the key lines of dialogue that I remember from the game, they hit the ones that felt important. And the big thing more than anything else is the performance from both of the actors in the sequence is phenomenal. You can feel the weight of everything they're discussing, of her finally asking Joel about what really happened, and him realizing that he really should not lie. Because she flat out says, if you, I'll give you one more chance, and if you don't tell me the truth, we're done. And he finally is able to, I mean, he mostly, like, nods or shakes his head. Like, it's even difficult for him to say it out loud. He gets a few words out eventually, obviously, but, like, to begin with, he's very much just, like, the most littlest acknowledgement he can give is what he actually gives. But the performances are fantastic. The only critique I would really have of it, honestly, is the moment where he says that if he had the choice again, right, if he was faced with the exact same situation, if he went back and did it again, I wouldn't change a thing. I'd make all the exact same choices, which feels very honest, by the way, from a character perspective. He knows who he is. That line did hit harder in the game. And I'm not even sure why, because the performance in the moment's fantastic. The scene is directed phenomenally. Druckmann, the creator of the game, did direct this episode, and I think he did a great job with it. I think it might just purely because of the placement. I think when this scene took place after everything else, like most of what's going to happen in season 3, presumably, it hit really hard. I think here it's effective, it works, but I remember just the sort of the raw emotion, the thud of it in the game, and it's still emotional here. There's still impact, right? It still means something to these characters, and it still feels something. But it was the only thing at the whole conversation that felt like, oh, this is good, but it's not as good as the game. What's interesting though is that there's an extra element here that is completely new. Which pays off in this scene, although most of it is a new scene that starts the episode with, which is this flashback to Joel as a kid, where he's basically taking the blame for something Tommy did. seemingly under the guise that they're concerned, or Tommy's scared that their dad's going to beat them up. The dad, by the way, is Lalo Salamanca from Better Call Saul. Tony Dalton, I think, is the actor's name. But I got hyped for that. As a Better Call Saul fan, I got hyped for that. And it's not the only face in this episode that I got hyped for. Joey Pants is in this episode, everyone. Eugene is Joey Pants. But we get this scene at the start where, the dad comes home, the dad's a cop, he sits down, and young Joel lies and says, hey, I was doing the bad thing, not Tommy. And he's like, don't bullshit me, I know, you get into a fight to protect him, and, like, I'm not an idiot, like, the other officers who saw the crime, blah, 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 blah. And Joel hits him with the line, I'm not going to let you hurt him, or something to that effect. I might be paraphrasing slightly. And it feels like in that moment, there's like a genuine kind of reaction from his dad, where he realizes that Joel's doing this to protect his brother, and maybe even kind of appreciates that in some way. Like, in some level, he can connect to that and understand and sort of almost be proud that Joel's doing that. Not that he shows that necessarily, but I think that might be in there. It's more this idea of he's realizing what's happening here is because of like how he is perceived by his sons. And I think it causes a moment of reflection where him recognizing Joel trying to take care of Tommy, he goes to the fridge, he gets some beers out and he hands him a beer and kind of like almost like a, hey, you're kind of a man now sort of thing, maybe based on what he just said. But he tells a story about his own father, right? Joel's grandfather, and how he was very abusive and how he once stole something from the store. It was just a chocolate bar, but his dad made him take it back and apologize. And that part sounds fine. That part sounds like a healthy thing. A parent saying, no, you can't shoplift, go and apologize and feel the shame of what you've done. But then, of course, the extra bit that's added on is the idea that the grandfather then punched him so hard inside the car that it completely, like, he had to have his jaw sewn shut for a month. And everyone knew why. And it all boils down to this little phrase at the end of the scene where he's like, yeah, okay, I've hit you guys. I've done some bad things. Maybe I've went too far. But I'm doing a little better than my dad did. And maybe if you ever get the chance, you'll do a little better than me. And I think it's a pretty good scene. It maybe gives you a kind of a window into why Joel got protective at an early age, why he does think the way he does. He's clearly a better man than this guy, but obviously he's still very, 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 very flawed. But the payoff to this is in the later scene with Ellie, right? And I love that he doesn't explain it. He doesn't explain to Ellie this backstory. We, the audience, heard all of this in the opening scene. He doesn't explain the context of why he's saying it. But when he's confessing all this stuff and he's saying that he would do it again, and she's clearly heartbroken by it and they're having a tough time getting through the conversation, he says that he loves her more than maybe she'll ever quite understand. But if she ever gets the chance someday, maybe she'll do better than he did. And I think what I really like about this, other than just been a great callback to the opening and him sort of acknowledging that he did a little bit better than his father did, who did a little bit better than his grandfather, and maybe one day Ellie will do a little bit better than him. I like that sort of like chain of it, but I think what I really like about it is that it adds a whole interesting extra layer of context, or subtext even, to that scene where Ellie has just found out about Dina being pregnant, and specifically the line where she says, I'm going to be a dad. Obviously, in the moment, it's a little jokey the way she phrases it that way, because obviously she's not a guy. But I think in hindsight, with this through line of like Joel's father and grandfather, and then him to Ellie, I think it's a very intentional choice to have her see herself as the father of this possible family that might happen with Dina. I think that's like a really inspired little choice. To kind of like set that through. So I really like that. Another thing that I quite liked in this episode, which obviously is mostly Ellie's various birthdays until we get to the night of the dance at New Year's. But this idea that there's some extra like character behind Joel getting pissed at Seth for getting homophobic at the dance. And that being that when Joel kind of discovers maybe that she's gay, he doesn't react that well, right? He catches her in a room with and I don't know her name, and I feel bad for saying the other lesbian in the town, but that's how she was introduced in episode 1, and she is the other one. But he gets pissed off, and she's getting a tattoo here, so he's kind of like pissed for a number of reasons, and says, "Oh, you're doing all the bullshit teenage crap at the same time," and he basically says, "And you're experimenting with girls," and there's actually. So this scene's actually new to the show, funnily enough, right? This scene where they have this fight, and this is what leads her to moving into the garage outside. This wasn't in the game. However, the conversation on the way to the museum, where he's sort of hinting that maybe she's got a thing for Jesse, because he thinks, oh, you spend a lot of time with that boy, this must be a thing. That was in the game, and that, you know, it had that funny kind of undertone to it, because we've already all realized that she's gay, and he's just being oblivious. And it's kind of cute and funny, right? Here, this adds like an extra layer on top of that, because it's like, oh no, he doesn't react amazingly. He kind of assumes this is just some weird phase, that she's being kind of wild, and doesn't really know how to react when she kind of emphasizes this isn't me experimenting. But and I think this, on its own, I think it's a solid enough scene, but I think what I really like about it is when we get his perspective of the dance, and we hear what Seth says again, and he gets up and pushes him. I love that it's coming from a place of guilt. It's coming from a place of, you know, one of the things, not the only thing, not even the main thing that's drove them apart, obviously, but one of the things that he messed up with when it came to her is how he reacted to that. And I don't think it's because Joel's like a horrible guy in the context of like the LGBT like community or anything like that. I don't think he's like bigoted per se. I think it's just not something he never thought about, and he's just it's all a bit of a shock to him. I don't necessarily think he was Seth once upon a time. Maybe he was. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. But I love the idea that hurt, or it made him angrier because he felt guilt that he didn't react that well to it, and he's like really trying to compensate in some way for it. I really appreciated that, and then obviously him trying to like say, "Hey, do you like Dina?" You know, when they're on the porch before things get more serious, and he's asking about her, and saying, "Oh, she'd be lucky to have you." Like he's really trying, he's making the effort, and there is like a sweetness to it. So I really like that extra little layer there. They have done so much more with this Seth character in the show than they did in the game. Like he's got so many like different scenes in this than he ever did. You know, how like Joel going to him to get the cake made, that wasn't in the game either. Just tons of stuff to vary, and I've liked most of it, honestly. The way it's kind of fed back, this especially, the way it's fed into Joel's own kind of character, who's obviously more important. Like Seth as a character on his own is not important. It's how he interacts with Ellie or Joel that's been the important thing. So I like that as well. I think that was also very good. The recreation of the birthdays. I mean, the only one you get in the game really. Maybe you get the first one when he sings to her. Maybe that may have come up in a different context. But the trip to the museum, the dinosaur, her climbing on the dinosaur, which you don't actually have to do in the game. Amazingly, you just can choose to do it because you're controlling her as the player, and I think everyone pretty much does it. I don't know anyone who says I'm not climbing that T-Rex. No one thinks like that. But all that stuff's great. The other big thing, of course, in this episode is very much the Eugene stuff, and I think what's so good about it. So Eugene's referenced in the game, but you never see Eugene. You never see how he died. He certainly wasn't played by Joey Pants, which was a great little realization when I had it. But what's so good about this is that they use this to further the reasons why Ellie is like determined to kind of confront Joel, right? And it's obviously this is the moment where the relationship truly breaks down. I think there was maybe assumption that it broke down when she moved to the garage, that, you know, the same thing caused that, and like the weird tension between them. But no, like that night when she's going to move out, he kind of like comes and talks to her, and things, you know, they don't completely mend things, but it's like, hey, the garage doesn't have any like water or heat in the earth, and give me a few days and I'll set it up so you've got your own space. Like, you know, he's still making an effort. There's still kind of like it's strained, like it's still very much like a teenager and troubled parent relationship in a lot of ways, but it's we're not at the situation we were at the start of the show, which is that they're not talking and everyone knows something's wrong. That's Eugene's death onwards a situation. And what's so good about this is that There's a moment when they find Eugene and he's already been bit. And he knows he's been bit. He doesn't lie about it, right? He hesitates for like a second and he lifts up his shirt and says he was bit. And obviously everyone knows what that means. But he begs Joel that he wants to see his wife again. He wants to see his wife again before he dies. He wants her to be the last thing he sees, all that kind of thing. And Joel's like, sorry, we have rules. You know I can't do that. And Ellie feels some sympathy and sort of jumps in, intersects, and says, hey, put out your hand, count to 10. Which he does. He does it, fine. And she's like, hey, we've got time. He's not close to turning yet. He's got like at least an hour. Let's take him back so he can have his goodbye with his wife. There's nothing wrong with that. And he doesn't want to do it. And there's a moment here when he kind of like gives in and he says, all right, Ellie, go back and get the horses and I'll start walking back with him and we'll meet in the middle and go back to town. And there's a moment when she's walking away and she turns around to look at him, clearly thinking, wait, I don't know if I believe that he's actually going to do this. She clearly is thinking he might just kill him when I'm not here. He's just getting rid of me so he can do it. And they stare at each other, and Joel eventually says, I promise. Like, he sort of reassures her, and she kind of nods. And what's so good about this is the last time we heard him say, I promise, was the ending of season 1. It was the promise me that everything that happened with the Fireflies at the hospital in Salt Lake City, promise me that's what happened. And he said, I promise. And we ended on that note. He basically has to kind of make the same lie again that's fresh. The difference is here is that Ellie's going to have no doubts. There's not going to be any wiggle room. And we already know. We saw her like reading her questions on the bed before this scene took place, where she's already questioning all the plot holes in Joel's story that don't add up. She's already thinking about this. She's already got it in her head. But this is the tipping point. This is the thing that puts us beyond the path of no return. Because when Joel makes the choice to go the other direction, takes him to the water, and says, hey, if you love someone, you can always see them. So Joey Pants like thinks about his wife, and he's like, I can see her. And it makes the really interesting choice here not to hear the gunshot. You just see the birds fly out the trees when it goes to the wide shot of the forest. I really liked that. That was a nice little artistic touch. It wasn't because most things would let you hear the gunshot as kind of the Stark thing. That's kind of let it play out as like a beautiful thing. And even though Ellie would have heard the gunshot, I think that's the obvious thing most filmmakers might have done here is you would have heard the gunshot and you'd have cut to Ellie, like turning around and being like, what? A gunshot? Joel, what have you done? Like, not actually saying that out loud, obviously, but just, that look on her face. But they don't do that. They show some restraint and they hold it back. And then when she comes and finds him, it's when they're dragging his body. It mirrors perfectly her dragging Joel's body back at the end of episode 2 of the season. He says to her, hey, his wife doesn't need to know anything more than, whatever, right? I'll tell her what she needs to know, but nothing more. And he's basically saying to Ellie, I'm going to lie about how this went down. It's the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. And when they get back, and out comes the wife, the therapist lady, Catherine O'Hara comes out. I said Han, not O'Hara, right? When she comes out, and she's crying, and she's looking up to Joel's arms, and he's like telling this story about how he got bit, he was brave, he wasn't scared. He did it himself. He shot himself. He took care of himself. He was a brave man with a brave ending. And Ellie is standing there. And one of the most inspired things the show has added, because it's been very give or take, right? There's some things where it kind of matches the game with. There's some things that it does a little bit worse than the game. There's some things it does a little bit better than the game, right? I think everyone will probably have different opinions as to how much of each of those, what the ratio is or all those things. But when it comes to the new stuff and what they've added, obviously the big thing in season 1 was the Bill episode, where they completely changed things and did a lot of new interesting stuff, and it was very, very good. Out of the things they have added for season 2, there's a legitimate argument that the best moment they've added is this moment, where Ellie, standing there watching this play out, watching Joel lie to this woman, crying in his arms, just breaks the ruse. She just says, that's not what happened. And then says, he begged to come and see you, and Joel killed him. And not only that, Joel promised him that he would, and then killed him. So obviously her hatred of Joel back from the start of the season suddenly makes a whole lot more sense. But it's like the look in his face as he's looking back at her, the realization that she was never going to be able to live with this lie, and how he was justifying it. Because that was the big thing. That was something that was said earlier on between Tommy and the therapist, was this idea that Joel justifies things to just be the way that he was always going to be. And, you know, how much truth there is to that is whatever. But, like, I think in this moment, him being challenged by the one person, maybe Tommy could as well, but, like, certainly the one person in his life that can challenge his bullshit. And he's realizing that she's growing older now. She's 19. She's going out on patrols. She's becoming stronger willed, stronger mentally, more confident of who she is and what she believes in. She is standing her ground here in challenging him and not accepting what he has said is the right thing to do. And that also calls into question everything else he's lied about to her. It's a really powerful moment. I really like it. And of course, that feeds into later when we get to the porch scene after the dance. Anyway, they do the thing where we see the bit we did before where she walks past, but then of course she comes back and everything plays out. And I've already talked about a lot of what they say there. But I really loved kind of this idea of the one benefit of doing the full porch scene now is that because we ended episode 5 with like her saying I know, right, when she was going after Nora, right? So it revealed last episode that she does know what happened at the end of season 1. Here we find out how she found out, or at least found out for sure, because like she said, she always suspected something, right? It was impossible for her not to think about it, and as she got older, she kept questioning it more. She kept thinking about the type of man that Joel is, and so on and so on. I think having this here to kind of like effectively give Joel a send-off from the show, and also show us that, yeah, like, because one of the sad things back from episode 3, which Ellie even kind of joked about when she was the forced therapy in the hospital happened, was this idea that the last time she saw Joel, they hadn't patched things up, and that she would always regret that. So you do get kind of a happy thing here to an extent, that in some level there was a first step was taken to maybe patching things up. Not that they, you know, are completely hunky-dory or anything, but she does say, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, but I would like to try. And it feels like the start of maybe something going forward. And it adds just a lot more context to her reaction when she saw what was happening to Joel the very next day, and her reaction to his death. And, you know, one of the things that I was talking about back then was this idea of maybe the guilt of like the last like year of her life with Joel was spent in this weird place where they weren't close, where she was shunning him out. And it's not that she was unjustified in that, and I think this conversation right at the end kind of just furthers that idea. But on some level, she didn't make the most of the time that she had with him, and now he's gone. And that further fuels this idea. But it also neatly further fuels the idea of how she has inherited a lot of things from Joel, or maybe less inherited, but more just had a lot of that in her anyway, and Joel's existence has kind of like nurtured it in a way, right? There's this idea of like, does she have this anger in her separate from Joel, or is Joel a part of a cause of it? This idea that she's bloodthirsty and she's going on revenge and she has to kill Abby, she has to get all the people responsible, and she's going to do it in spite of everything else. In fact, one of the key moments I'm thinking about now from last episode is the moment where she chooses to go to the hospital instead of going back to the theater where Dina and Jesse have went. It's making me think of the moment in this episode where Joel's with Eugene, and it's not really a crossroads because they're just in the forest, but it's effectively a crossroads, and he says go right, and it leads them to the water where he's going to kill him. Whereas if he'd said go left, presumably that would have led to where Ellie was with the horses. And it kind of felt like Ellie had her own moment like that last episode. And it's this idea that just like Joel, she's going to make the unhealthy choice at these key junctures because of what she thinks she needs to do, because of this fire in her that he is, you know, in part, like, it truly makes them feel like father and daughter. It makes her feel like she's the next in line of this, like, slightly better than the guy before. But at the same time, her problem these past few years and her being upset that they didn't use her for a cure and all these other things does show that she does have this moral center, that she does have this strong moral side that she's also clinging to. And in some ways, Joel's death has kind of almost made her, like, I don't want to say relapse, because it's not like she was doing like murderous rampages before and she got over it, but it feels like it's maybe been kind of a tether that's like set her back in the other direction again, where she was, I had all this moral compass. She wanted to like give herself up to like save everyone. She feels this guilt over everyone who dies from the infection now. She thinks, oh, what could have been if if they could have used me to save her, so on, so on. But with Joel's death, the effect of that has been that she's now pivoting further back towards Joel's way of life inside of thinking. And it's just another effect of the cycle of violence and revenge. That Abby coming and getting this revenge has set her back on a path that's less noble. A path that is more chaos and is more likely to lead to more people being hurt. That it's just going to inspire more people to be vengeful and angry and so on and so on. And I think this idea of all this, and obviously the title of the episode, The Price, comes from this idea that Joel even accepts that if she never wants to speak to him again, that's the price of keeping her alive. And it'll hurt, but like he would still make the same choice again. That kind of love, which because she calls him selfish, and like I think you could fairly argue that it is selfish. But you also get why that means something to someone, that you like. If you mean so much to someone, if someone loves you so much that they're willing to even like ruin the relationship they have with you to keep you alive regardless of what you wanted, that is such a powerful like love, that while parts of it obviously are not healthy, and like, yeah, certain people would make the choice to give the person what they want, even if it's the most painful thing they ever have to let them do, or whatever. It is a love that she's probably never felt from anyone else, not even from Dina right now, in some ways. This like super, I guess, truly parental love. This idea that a parent would give themselves up for their child no matter what. That kind of unconditional, no matter what. That's kind of what he had for her by, certainly by the end of the first season, and certainly still now up till he died. And I think until that was gone, and I think a lot of kids don't appreciate that when they're growing up, to be fair, but I think that's the sort of thing where like not appreciating it and not getting to the age where she's maybe forgave a lot of the things, and not getting to the age where she understands why he is a lot of the ways that he is. I mean, who's to say in the world where she ends up raising a kid with Dina, if Joel was still alive, that at some point she would understand and sympathize with him more than she did when he was actually doing a lot of the things that he was doing to protect her. It's interesting. And in many ways, maybe you could see Tommy's kind of like that in a way, where Tommy did kind of get out from under Joel, and he still got a relationship with Joel. It's not like, they accepted him into the town and all the rest of it, but he did get a healthier sort of life away from Joel, and it made him arguably a more balanced and better man, and whatever else he's got going on. And it's almost like maybe that's the same thing that could have happened for Ellie, but the death of Joel, when it happened, has set her on kind of a different path. And it's part of the tragedy of the story is hoping that maybe she can get over that or get through it and still have some happiness on the other side, and whatever. There's a lot of other little things in here. Of course, like Joel fixing up the guitar for her birthday, and just those little snippets are here or there like that. The episode ends, of course, with coming back to present day and seeing Ellie go back to the theater, which I assume that's where we'll pick up in the next episode, more or less. Really good stuff, though. I don't have a lot to really critique in this episode. Like I say, there's like one line that had a lot of impact in the game, that I don't think hits quite as hard in the show. But there's other things in the scene that have been added that I also think work really well in the context of how it's presented here. The whole maybe you'll do a little better than me, I think, was a nice little addition to the whole thing. So yeah, there you go. That's my feelings on this week's Last of Us. We got one more. We got the finale. Hopefully it lands. Hopefully, I mean, obviously I have a good idea of what we're probably getting in the finale and where it's maybe going to give us the cliffhanger for season 2 to end on. But we'll see. Hopefully it's not going to be that much of a wait till season 3. That might be the other reason, by the way, why they put the porch scene in season 2. Because maybe if you'd left it till late season 3 and there's like 2 years between seasons, it might feel really weird. Like right now, we all remember the dance really well. We remember what was said. We remember that they almost, like, she passed them on the porch afterwards. So all this here pays off and just neatly fits in. I think if this happened at the end of a season 3 that takes place or doesn't come out for another couple of years, people might have not remembered it as well. People might be not getting the full context or impact of the fact that this is the night before he died. Whereas here, in season 2, we do get that context. This is maybe one of the casualties of splitting it into 2. But, hey, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But obviously, let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support the channel and keep the reviews coming, both here and obviously over at MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. Also, YouTube membership's a valid way to support everything. Same with YouTube. Thanks. If you want to do a one-time thing, any support is really appreciated. Thank you very much for joining me. I do, once again, appreciate it. I say appreciate it a lot at the end. I need another, I didn't get the thesaurus out. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?